Ever since I started living in Asia, there's something I noticed and I always wondered. Japan is packed with tourists, but China and Korea aren't. Why? I used to think that maybe it's because of language or the technology, but the truth could be much more interesting and way more revealing than we imagine. Why is Japan overflowing with tourists everywhere, while China and Korea, also cultural powerhouses, don't receive the same level of international tourism? At first glance, people said it's because of the visa. But no, that's just the surface. The real reason is much deeper, more strategic, and more revealing. And the most interesting part is that understanding this completely changes the way we see these countries. Because maybe it's not that China can't attract tourists, it's that it doesn't need to. And above all, it doesn't do it the same way Korea and Japan do. Japan versus Korea versus China. Japan played the long game. It took its traditional and pop culture and turned it into a global brand. Samurai, temples, anime, sushi, kawaii. Before the world visits Japan, the world already loved Japan. Then it made everything easy. English signs, hyper-organized trains, JR Pass, Google Maps works, infrastructure designed for tourists. Japan prepared itself to welcome you. Korea did something similar, but modern. It exported K-pop, K-dramas, skincare, fashion. It sold an aspiration, a lifestyle. It doesn't have as much tourism infrastructure as Japan, but it has something just as powerful: global storytelling. And China? China has 5,000 years of history. Invented gunpowder, paper, the compass, has futuristic cities, unreal mountains, endless cuisine, 56 ethnic groups, temples, art. So why don't people visit massively? Because unlike Japan and Korea, China does not need foreign tourism. Reason 1. Its internal market is huge. China has 1.4 billion people, a massive middle class with money to travel. During holidays like Golden Week or Chinese New Year, hundreds of millions of domestic trips happen. Domestic tourism alone is a colossal industry. For the government and companies, the equation is simple. Why invest millions to attract 10 million foreign tourists when you already have 800 million domestic tourists traveling every year? Many iconic places can barely handle the number of Chinese tourists who visit them. Great Wall in Badaling, the Forbidden City, always packed. They don't need foreigners to fill them. In fact, sometimes they need the opposite: regulation to avoid overflow. When your internal market is that big, foreign visitors go from being a priority to being a bonus. Reason 2, the invisible barrier of language and technology. Many people think that the lack of English is a flaw, but what if it's not a mistake, but a filter? If China made everything perfectly accessible in English, tons of curious but unprepared tourists will come. People who'd get frustrated quickly. By keeping a certain level of difficulty, those who visit are genuinely interested, more respectful, more adaptable. A filtered tourist. Also, China lives in its own digital ecosystem. WeChat, Alipay, Didi, Amap, Ctrip. Everything works incredibly inside China, but it's designed for its own population, language, and rules. To adapt it to international standards would mean opening data, changing infrastructures, giving up control. That clashes with its cyber-sovereign model. That's why even when they open something like international payments, they do it halfway. They accept some cards, not all. There's English signage in big cities, but not everywhere. Google doesn't work, and the general attitude is tourists should adapt to China, not China to tourists. It's not inability, it's a choice. Reason 3. Image control and soft power the Chinese way. China wants to control its narrative. Yes, it cares about how the world sees it, but it doesn't want that narrative shaped by mass tourism or Western-style influencers. It prefers to show what it considers valuable: technological achievements, official history, urban development. That's why you see propaganda like modern, strong, and advanced China, but not as much promotion of chaotic day life, underground art, or alternative culture, the things many young tourists look for. Japan and Korea use tourism as cultural marketing. China uses tourism as a diplomatic, selective control tool. It prefers delegations, exhibitions, institutional exchanges, less freedom, more control. China doesn't want you to tell its story. It wants to tell its story to you. Reason 4. A country the size of a continent. Implementing uniform tourism infrastructure in a country as large as China is almost impossible. In Shanghai, Beijing, or Guangzhou, you do get English signs, modern airports, metro systems, but China is not just those cities. There are entire provinces that are rural, full of mountains, with hundreds of dialects and different local cultures. In many regions, foreigners are extremely rare, and for local governments, investing in English is not a priority. Their priority is serving their own people, growing the local economy, not attracting foreigner backpackers. Also, even if they wanted to unify everything, coordinating thousands of cities with different development levels is extremely complex. Japan is the size of California. China is almost an entire continent. Is it changing? Yes, but at its own pace. China isn't static. It's moving. Visa waivers for several European countries, Malaysia, Thailand, others. WeChat and Alipay now accept foreign cars. Well, some. Airports and trains in big cities have more English. Events like the 2022 Olympics push improvements. Some apps like Didi or AMAP now have English versions. But keep in mind, these changes are selective and strategic. It's not opening the world like Japan, it's opening just enough, where it benefits, when it benefits. China is not ignoring tourists, it's choosing what kind of tourists it wants. China does want tourism, but under its own rules. China doesn't want mass tourism. It wants quality and control. It prefers fewer tourists, but ones who respect its norms, culture, and system. Tourism that contributes to its soft power, not one that exposes it to chaos or criticism. Instead of saying, "Everyone, come in," China says, "If you truly want to understand me, adapt to me, learn how I work, and I let you in." And as harsh as it sounds, it makes sense. Japan and Korea used tourism to grow their global branding. China is already an economic giant. It doesn't need the world to fund it as a travel destination. The real question isn't why doesn't China make tourism easier? The real question is what will happen the day China decides to take tourism seriously. China is one of the most fascinating countries I ever lived in. It's huge, diverse, modern, Asian, fast, calm, everything at once. And because of that, understanding how tourism works here isn't simple. It's layered, historical, cultural, and shaped by priorities that are not always visible from the outside. Maybe one day China will adjust its approach to international tourism. Or maybe it won't need to. Maybe what makes traveling here unique is precisely the contrast between what people expect and what they actually find. But here's the truth. Everything I share today comes from my personal experience and the patterns I've observed. That doesn't mean it's the full picture. There are always other factors, economic, cultural, political, and even personal stories that influences how each person experiences China, Korea, and Japan. And that's what I'd love to hear from you. If you've lived here or visited recently or see things from another angle, your perspective can add depth to this conversation. Because places this complex can't be reduced to a simple explanation. And maybe the real story is something that we can piece together. This is all for today. If you found today's topic interesting, please don't forget to share. Don't forget to give me a like, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe. This is all from me. See you next time. Bye bye.